My wife lost her father when she was 11 years old, Alava Shalom. After he died, she received a picture book from a relative called Tear Soup. It's a book that analogizes making and tending to tear soup to moving through grief in an attempt to somehow process the emotions of loss, or at least begin to explain them to a child. It tells the story of how an older woman named Grandy, who mourns a loss that is never named. In the beginning of the book, Grandy knowingly dons an apron because grief is never clean and always takes longer to cook than anyone thinks it will. As Grandy tends to her tear soup, we learn that the soup must have both the bitterness of the salt of our tears and the sweetness of our most cherished memories to balance the flavor. Sometimes, Grandy makes her tear soup crying loudly in the car by herself, and sometimes she adds to it softly in a room full of people when no one notices. In Parashat Vayigash, there are so many tears shed, and all of them are difficult not to notice. In one of perhaps the most dramatic scenes in our Torah, Yehuda pleads fervently with Yosef to take him as a slave rather than his younger brother Binyamin. Yehuda recounts the events of their interactions, coming back to his argument over and over and over again. He begs Yosef, "For how long? For how can I go back to my father unless the boy is with me? Let me not be a witness to the woe that would overtake my father." With these final words, Yosef cannot bear it any longer. He calls out to his attendants, telling them to leave him alone with the brothers. We can almost hear his voice shaking as he sends them away. As soon as the attendants have left the room, he breaks down. Our Torah tells us that his sobs were so loud that they could be heard outside as he revealed his true identity to his brothers. Yosef tells them to draw near to him so that they may see that he is in fact their brother. As they stare at him in shock, Yosef becomes swept up in the moment, and breathlessly he relates that this must have been God's plan all along, that he was sold into slavery to become a ruler in Egypt, and that his brothers and their families will come to Egypt and live in Goshen, and he will ensure that they have everything they need, and that they must bring his father so that Yosef and Yaakov may reconnect. We can picture his brothers still looking at him dumbfounded, blankness on their faces. It is in this moment, so overcome by emotion, swelling inside of him, pulsing inside of him, that Yosef embraces Binyamin, the youngest brother. Literally, his face falls on his brother's neck, and they both weep. And then he embraces and kisses each of his brothers, all of them weeping. So much crying. Vayefk, vayefk, vayefk. This moment of shared familial crying is extremely poignant, and it stands for something greater. For Rashi, this is the breaking of a barrier. He writes that after the brothers wept together, they were able to speak to Yosef without embarrassment in a way that they never could before. Or HaChaim adds that these tears enabled them to share with Yosef anything that was on their minds. Finally, after so many years of resentment and guilt, their tears bring down walls and communication flows freely from brother to brother for the first time. The overflowing of tears shed in Parashat Vayigash not only breaks down barriers, but also acts as a culmination of tear soup that has been tended to or perhaps neglected throughout the generations. Throughout Bereshit, each of our patriarchs suffered a critical loss of their son's presence in their lives. Following the Akedah, we never hear Yitzchak speak another word to his father Avraham. It's especially shocking because this is the son who was described as Avraham's favorite son, the one he loved. The absence evokes the silent anguish of having your child around and yet never having a meaningful interaction with them again. The cycle only continues with Yitzchak. Manipulated by his family, Yitzchak bestows the blessing of the firstborn on Yaakov, the younger son, instead of Esav. With that, Esav himself bursts into tears before declaring that he will kill Yaakov. Knowing that Esav will actually go through with it, Rivka tells Yaakov to flee. And Yitzchak and Rivka never see their son, Yaakov, again. What must that have been like? A family permanently torn apart. How many tears must have been shed? And Yaakov favored Yosef so much that it made his other sons wild with jealousy, selling him into slavery and lying to their father that he had been killed by a beast. Just 2 weeks ago in Parashat Vayeshev, we read that after Yaakov heard this devastating news, he immediately rent his clothes and mourned his son for several days. All the while, he was so distraught that he refused comfort from anyone. And our Torah reads, Vayefk oto aviv. And Yosef's father cried over him. After generations of trickery, lack of communication, threats, and overall dysfunction, finally, with the outpouring of tears of these brothers, the cycle is broken. As Rabbi Roli said so emphatically last night, when the brothers come back and tell Yaakov that Yosef is actually still alive, he doesn't believe them. The text literally reads, Vayafog libo. His heart became numb. Yaakov has suffered so much loss in his life, from growing up in an unhealthy family environment to fostering one of his own, from losing his favorite son to a wild beast, to losing the love of his life, Rachel, in childbirth. Why would Yaakov believe that Yosef was indeed alive? Whether or not it was true, he would go down to Egypt to see for himself. That night, God came to him, Yaakov, Yaakov, Hineni. And God said, I am God, the God of your father. Fear not to go down to Egypt, for I will make you there into a great nation. I myself will go down with you to Egypt, and I myself will also bring you back. And then we have this beautiful piece. V'yosef yashit yado al einecha. And Joseph's hands will close your eyes. Most of our commentators see this as a nod to the closest relative closing the eyes of a person as they depart from this world. They say that this last line means that when Yaakov is ready to die, it will be Yosef who places his hands on his father's eyes. And we know if we read ahead that that's what happens. However, Or HaChaim has another take. He writes, don't read einecha as your eyes, but rather read einecha as your spring. They have the same root, ayin, yud, nun. Read it as your spring from which your essence and your waters flow. In other words, with this moment of prophecy, God tells Yaakov, you no longer have to tend to your tear soup. Your son is coming back to you. The tears shed between brothers are not just tears of reconnection, but tears of redemption. These tears are a second chance for Yaakov at having a functional family as he's reunited with his favorite son. For the brothers, the tears that they cried together healed their relationship with one another, but the refu'ah, the healing powers of these tears, extended far beyond that, reaching out and providing redemption for past and future generations alike. These tears touched all of our patriarchs and matriarchs and stretched forward to touch Ephraim and Manasseh, and eventually to touch us. For the last 78 days, we have cried thousands of tears. We are all, in some way, drowning in our tear soup. And unlike Yaakov, many of our Israeli brothers and sisters and siblings and parents and grandparents and children and those of our Gazan counterparts, they're not coming back. And perhaps there can be something redemptive in our tears too. Perhaps someday we will be able to see a glimmer of light that reflects off of our tear droplets. And perhaps that glimmer of light will hold a semblance of love and hope. And perhaps it will lead us on a redemptive path towards peace. Shabbat Shalom.